Hi, Johnny. How's it going?
Well, just got in late last night. Got some rest this last night, and we're at it. Looks like we have a good showing sign up so far, roughly 40.
Nice. For this session, that's great. I'm super glad to hear that.
Yeah, I've been making a strong push on social and reaching out to some of our members and some other partners as well. So
Nice.
I'm glad it's up there.
Nice job. Yeah, this is great.
How
Actually,
how how's the Ascend rural one?
it's good. Ascend, I haven't even checked it today, but it was at like 70 something yesterday. I
Nice.
think 85. I don't know
Sweet.
how that got completely out of hand. So hopefully all of those people don't show up because, we can only have 100 on the call. So that would be crazy.
Let's
Um,
max it out.
I
Love it.
know, right? Oh, I've got the both Johns on the call, so I will just go ahead and end
Cool.
it now. John and John. All right. Fantastic.
Good morning.
Hello.
Well, afternoon over there.
Actually, let me turn my lights on. It's kind of dark in my office.
Hey, John.
Hello.
All right, perfect. Presentation is up. Nicely done.
Yep. So far, so good.
Exactly. It's going to plan.
Sweet. So, John, John Howlett, well, I guess John too. Currently we have about, I think, 41 signed up for the webinar, so pretty decent showing. And then I will share with you the email list and sign up afterwards.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Of course. Did you guys have any questions regarding the run of show? I think India has her talking points, and then I think we're pretty much good to go. Hand it over to John. Ask some questions here and there.
Yeah, no, from my side, I'm going to keep it pretty brief and leave you, John, the time to go through your presentation. I'll probably just call for folks to, as you are presenting, if any comments, questions, things come up, just to use the chat. And then I'll circle back to that towards the end with whatever time we have left. And then if it is a little bit of a quiet room, John, it was helpful just to have those extra prepared questions. So I'll kind of sprinkle in one or two of those, if that makes sense. So we'll keep it pretty simple on this one.
Sounds good.
Real quick, John, on a different topic, how's HLTH for you guys? We were not successful in finding any other rooms at the Venetian, so majority of the team is staying off-site. So we're staying, I think, at Harrah's, Bellagio, and the Cosmo.
Yeah, no, thanks for the update, Johnny. Appreciate you looking into that. I think our team is set. Don't recall. I think Will is actually was able to get a room at the Venetian, but Steve and Robin are elsewhere, as I recall. So don't recall where exactly, but I'll get you that information.
Perfect. And then are they all registered, good to go?
Yes, I believe so. We'll double check that, but yeah, we should be set there.
Yeah, now that I'm back home, I'll kind of go through the list of things I need to get to you guys with regards to health. Just even if I did send it before, I'm just gonna resend it just in case. Any kind of RSVPs, dinners, to make sure you guys are at, and then just to make sure we cross the T's and dot all the I's.
Yeah, I think I know you're working on the bio book for the event, but to the extent we could get any advanced visibility in that, Johnny, for the companies, ecosystem companies that will be out there.
Yep.
And can collaborate on some, potentially some introductions, that would be great.
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely on my list as well. The bio book will probably come out a little bit later, but I think what I have is I have a set of a list and the link and then some contacts. So I'll send you that first. And then if there's anyone in particular that you wanted intros to, then I can happy to make up those intros before. But I think that's easiest, just give you that list as opposed to waiting for that bio book to come out because they're still
Right.
working on it. So, but that's
Right.
my list.
Yeah, absolutely.
To you and Robin today.
Great. Look forward to getting that.
And we missed you we missed you the last few days. Ended up getting Giordano's or pizza with a few other folks. That was I think I had like one and a quarter slice. Couldn't do more than that.
Sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. So I couldn't make it downtown, just a bit backed up, and commute time is can be lengthy,
Yeah, no.
unfortunately.
I get it. But I did have a good successful cheese pull pizza. And I think we sent it over to India because I think she's had it as well, and
Yeah.
good stuff.
It was
When in Chicago, got to do it.
For sure.
I think we're 3 minutes till the time of the show. Real quick, what's better, Giordano's or Lou Malnati's?
I'm partial to lose. My family and I are, but Giordano's is not no slouch either. So
Good stuff because I grabbed some back. I grabbed some frozen ones back for the kids, so we'll see if they like it.
nice.
that's a good call.
Yeah, you can't come back empty-handed after being gone for a few days.
Right.
John, where are you at again? Jon Moore.
Well, normally I would be near Sarasota, Florida. However, I am currently evacuated in Auburn, Alabama.
Oh
no.
gosh, yeah.
When we were at the Reuters Total Health, there were a number of speakers that had to leave early or couldn't make it in because they were busy evacuating as well. So our thoughts and prayers are with you guys.
So far, early reports are that we have minor damage, so we're hopeful that we don't return to too much of a mess. But
Wow.
electricity's still out, so we don't have access to any of our surveillance cameras or anything to see what it looks like.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, one of our colleagues was in North Carolina, and they had sent some pictures over, and it was a lot of like down trees and power lines and stuff like that, and it was crazy. From Hurricane Helene.
Yeah, the damage in North Carolina in particular from Helene is horrendous in some cases. It's mudslides and
A lot.
towns washed away. It's really horrific.
Mhm.
And real quick, John Howlett, John, did you say you were gonna drive the slides as John's talking? Just to
Actually,
make sure
Jon Moore's gonna drive himself. My internet's been a little spotty today, even though I'm nowhere near hurricane weather. So John's gonna drive.
Great, and we're just at the top of the hour. We've got 5 in the waiting room. I'm going to message them and then just give ourselves an extra minute or two just to see who else joins us online.
I have people messaging me. How do I get in?
I'm gonna go off camera since I don't have any formal role here, but I'm obviously here.
Sounds good.
Indy, do you see Jomo on there? He was messaging me.
No, I do not.
Okay. I just sent him the link.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just see if we can get a few extras before we kick it off. And then let me confirm. I believe this said this was recording. Yes. Okay. So we will, Johnny, I guess that's a good question. So when this is ready, should we trim it and just share the file, or do you want to have this uploaded to YouTube or Vimeo or one of the video sharing services, or how do we want to manage this?
I would say let's we can trim it, share it, and see if Clearwater wants to do anything with it, and then eventually we'll definitely share it on Vimeo or YouTube. Well, yeah, exactly. But we definitely need to cut out our comments from 10 minutes before about hurricanes and whatnot.
Of course. Yes, Johnny, Jomo did join us.
Perfect.
Got 6 in the waiting room. Probably at 10:03, I'll open it. I'm sure we'll get some more folks that just trickle in as we're getting started. All right, why don't we go ahead and it's work for everyone. We'll go ahead and kick it off and get things rolling.
Perfect. Thanks, India.
Of course. All right, see some folks are joining us from the waiting room. Thank you guys. Just give a second for everybody to get settled. Got some more coming in as well. All righty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. My name is India Williams. I am the VP of Operations here at Scale Health. I first just want to take a moment to show our appreciation for all of you for choosing to spend an hour of your time either this morning or this afternoon with us. As you're all very well aware, today's conversation is all around exploring strategies for managing AI and cybersecurity risk with our partners at Clearwater. I am so pleased to be joined by Jon Moore, who is Clearwater's Chief Risks Officer, Head of Consulting Services and Client Success. So Jon wears many hats on the Clearwater team. He works with organizations across the healthcare ecosystem to really develop and execute strong cybersecurity and compliance programs that meet industry regulations, standards, and most importantly, really keep data and systems protected from infiltration. And so the reason why we're really here today is that along with the work that Clearwater does in really helping organizations move to a more compliant state, they are really committed to educating the industry about emerging issues and challenges that we're facing, since they're really at the forefront of the conversation around the use of AI in healthcare. Today, we're going to spend maybe the next 40 minutes or so on a presentation led by Jon, where he'll share some insights, strategies, helpful tips and tricks around navigating this industry. And then we're hoping to make this an engaging, interactive conversation. And so with whatever time we have left as we gear up towards the top of the hour, we'll use that for a Q&A. Just to help facilitate that, if you wouldn't mind, as Jon is going through his presentation, if there are any comments, questions, if you were resonating with any of the material that he's sharing, please feel free to use the chat as a way to kind of capture some of those thoughts. Towards the end of the presentation with our time left, I'll circle back to those comments or questions, maybe invite you to unmute yourself, turn your camera on, and speak directly to Jon or our teams, and we'll kind of go from there. So with that, I am pleased to introduce you all to Jon. Jon, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to give us an intro and jump into your presentation?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, India. So as India mentioned, today I'd like to talk a bit about strategies for managing AI and cybersecurity risks. So originally, when I initially had developed this presentation, it was primarily focused for helping our providers out there, hospitals, health systems, physician practice management groups, those types of folks in understanding how to effectively incorporate AI machine learning into their practices. Understand today we have a lot of folks who are from the business associate, health IT community as well on the line. And so I think for you folks, this will be helpful to understand, what your clients are thinking about and how they're intending or will likely in the future, if they're not already, be thinking about managing AI risks and machine learning risks from solutions that they're looking to purchase to help you align both your messaging to them as well as what you're doing to protect your solutions on their behalf. So looking forward to the conversation. And again, as India mentioned, any questions, please don't hesitate to ask those. That's when I think it's the most valuable, is when we can have a bit of a dialogue and address specific things that are questions that folks might have. So every story, at least from my mind, has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we had to pick some place to begin our story today. And where I'd really like to start with is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which was passed in 1996. And most people know this as HIPAA. And so if you look historically where this came from, there was a lot of conversation in the industry, but primarily in the federal government about how can we make healthcare more effective and perhaps more importantly, more cost effective. And the thinking at that time really was that, well, hey, if we're able to digitize health information, we can make it flow more easily between providers and payers. And if we just do that, it's going to become more cost effective, more efficient in its delivery, and we're going to get a better result. And that's all we really need to do. And that's what the impetus between the HIPAA really was in many ways, is to start to standardize and have some standards around the exchange of information associated with insurance payments in particular to support healthcare. So, what happened? Well, that sort of came out and in and of itself didn't really move the needle. But what the federal government decided in its infinite wisdom was, what we really need to do is provide some fuel for this fire. We need to give some incentives. And it turns out that $27 billion in incentives can move the needle. And we see that happening between the period of 2009 to today, with the introduction of the meaningful use dollars, particularly in the adoption of electronic health records by U.S. hospitals and other providers, just exploded. Now, there's still some folks out there that have not adopted EHRs, and every once in a while I run into those. In fact, I gave a similar presentation to this in Nebraska recently, and it turned out that one of those few folks out there that hasn't adopted EHRs was in that area. But for the most part, what we see across the industry is a universal adoption of electronic health records, electronic medical records. And so that's where we are now. In addition to that, what we've seen more recently is that, this is great. All of these organizations have adopted EHRs, and we've looked, and healthcare really hasn't gotten less expensive, and the information really isn't free flowing. So what's happening? Well, it turns out that there were also incentives in place for the EHR vendors themselves to create their own stovepipes to control the flow of that information. And so what we saw happen was the introduction of the first the change to promoting interoperability from meaningful use, but ultimately the introduction of the information blocking rules that organizations are trying to manage right now to further unlock that flow of information. Because as I said, you go back historically, what we were trying to do, the theory was, if we can just digitize the health information, it'll flow freely and we'll have better outcomes, we'll have better control by individuals over their healthcare, and we'll have a reduction in cost. And so keep those motivations in mind as we talk through this. Of course, in addition to the EHRs, we've seen a lot of other things happen. For example, telemedicine, remote monitoring. Believe it or not, the original experiments around telemedicine happened in the 50s and 60s. And this is another thing that we see when we start to look at this historically. While we think of these technological change, these revolutions happening very suddenly, in fact, they really don't. A lot of this stuff is around for some time before we see the broad adoption of it. And so keep that in mind as another theme as we go through this as well. But in any event, we see telemedicine, remote monitoring taking off, in particular during the COVID era. We saw a lot of acceleration in the adoption of telemedicine, remote monitoring technologies. We see digital health, of course, taking off. We've seen wearables and mobile health apps becoming more and more popular. My wife now has me on the smartwatch that's monitoring me all the time and lets her know if I suddenly collapse. I'm not sure whether that's so she can initiate a celebration or send help. It's still unclear at this point. But nevertheless, a lot of us are now using these types of devices. That data is going somewhere. It's being used to monitor health. We see physicians now, asking their patients to use these devices more and more frequently, and data analytics. Of course, behind a lot of this is big data and data analytics, and that plays a big role in this, of course, as well as we see the further adoption of technology. Now, when we had HIPAA come out, there were some folks who were thinking a bit ahead, and they said, you know what, if we digitize this health information and it flows freely, we may get these benefits we're talking about in terms of improved care and better choices and reduced costs. But, there may be some risks associated with this as well. If that EPHI is out there, it's digital, it's going to be accessible to a new or broader set of threat actors that we might not, that currently don't have access to that information, and that may prove harmful. We also need to be concerned about privacy. And so what we saw was the adoption of the HIPAA security rule, adoption of the privacy rule, breach notification rules over time. And it took some time for that to happen. Now we're into the 2000s before that occurs. Well, how effective have these rules been? Well, when we look at the risks and the severity of the impact of healthcare breaches, it has not gone well. All right, we've seen a continuous increase, almost exponential increase in the number of healthcare records breached. And you might look at this and say, well, John, it looks like we've made a significant improvement this year. Well, in fact, this year, that does not include the majority of the records from the Change Healthcare breach, which is estimated to be somewhere in excess of 100 million records in and of itself. And so, no, we're not doing better this year. It's gotten worse and worse in terms of the of breaches, records exposed, impact on healthcare organizations. And in fact, when we look at that from a dollar perspective, probably the best study out there in terms of the impact on healthcare or any industry for that matter, on breaches and the cost of that comes from the Ponemon Institute. This study is now sponsored by IBM, comes out annually. And what we saw in the most recent study is that across all industries, the cost of a breach has gone up 10%, closing in on $5 million now. Actually, in healthcare, it fell a little bit, at least that's the initial impression, to $9.8 million is the average cost of a breach in healthcare, still double the average cost in other industries. So breach in healthcare in the US, most expensive industry in any geographic area to have a breach. But I got to caveat this as well. As I mentioned in the previous slide, it didn't include Change Healthcare. These numbers in regard to the average cost of a breach in healthcare do not include the mega breaches. It doesn't include the Change Healthcares. It doesn't include the large ransomware attacks. And in many of those cases now, we're seeing those the costs associated with those large mega breaches of 1 million records or more, far in excess of $100 million. And in fact, Change may be estimated to go over $1 billion in the cost of that breach when we get to the end of that. So it's very significant costs to these organizations, and we're seeing the same things over and over again: stolen credentials, phishing, social engineering types of attacks are becoming more sophisticated. I'll talk about that in a second. But again, what we're doing to manage the risk associated with the digitization of healthcare information and health records has not been effective to manage that risk. In addition to that, and this is what's now becoming even more clear, for years within the cybersecurity industry, there was anecdotal stories of the impact on patient safety as a result of these attacks. A lot of academic studies were starting to come out, pointing to the impact on patient safety growing from these attacks. Recently, the FBI and DOJ now treat cyber attacks as threat of life type of crimes. So it's becoming clearer and clearer that particularly ransomware attacks are now threats to patient safety. There's no doubt about it, whether that's patients having to be rerouted to other facilities, the inability to access some of these systems and medical records that are impacting or posing risks to care. There was also a very unfortunate case in Alabama, where I happen to be at right now, where a pregnant woman came into a hospital. Unbeknownst to her, the hospital was undergoing a ransomware attack. That attack made the fetal monitoring system unavailable to the healthcare providers at that facility. She ran into trouble during her labor. The child was stillborn. It was revived. That child later passed away. Significant lawsuits against the physicians, the hospital, other folks that were involved during that situation. Initially, that was resolved for an extremely large sum. However, there was questions about the hospital not then paying off on their settlement, and that's back in litigation right now. So we have these very specific examples now occurring of impacts on patient safety as a result of these attacks, which is just upping the ante even more from a healthcare provider perspective. Of course, now we have a new tool, right? We have a new technology in the game. We have AI, and machine learning in particular has been around for a while. Now, when I say AI has been around for a while as well. But oftentimes when I talk about AI right now, what people are envisioning is the generative AI types of tools, the chat GPTs that are out there right now. And I think, there's a lot of hype associated with those tools, and it's driven AI up the hype curve, if you will, if you're familiar with that curve. We're way up the hype curve right now with AI. And I think in large part, and that is because, well, much of that technology has been around for some time. Again, that those tools like ChatGPT really made it real for the average person. When I can interact with those tools and I can ask them a question or ask them to create something, and suddenly there it appears. It's like magic to most people. And so they start to be able to envision what this might mean in the future, and it makes it much real. When we look at what it means from the healthcare, certainly from an investment perspective, we see again this projected, let's call it exponential curve, if you will, when it comes to investment. So right now, AI market size in healthcare around $26.5 billion, a little bit more than that. That's expected to rise dramatically over the next 10 years, to $638 billion in most recent projections. Of course, we're projecting out quite a distance with this projection, but nevertheless, the expectation is that there's going to be significant investment in AI enabled solutions in the healthcare marketplace. And certainly it is the talk of the town when I'm out there talking with large hospitals, medium hospitals, more sophisticated providers, those types of folks, as well as our health IT digital health clients. Everybody's looking to put AI or implement AI somehow into their solutions to talk about that. Well, why do we want to do that? Why is this investment going to occur? Well, here's some of those reasons, and you tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. We're going to have improved diagnostics and improved treatment and increased efficiency and advanced research and development, improved patient care and monitoring, and ultimately we're going to reduce the cost. So again, it's a lot of these same themes that we saw with the adoption of the electronic health records, adoption of technology in general, the digitization of health information. And again, there's this ongoing, search for the magic bullet that's going to make healthcare more effective, more efficient, particularly here in the United States. And so AI is the next potential tool that offers those types of benefits for healthcare and for the community. And that's, of course, driving again a lot of the interest in AI. Now, unfortunately, artificial intelligence, machine learning, like every other tool I think that's ever been developed since the invention of the club, can be used for good or it can be used for evil. And that's what we're seeing with AI itself. So I mentioned, social engineering earlier, phishing. Well, it was bad enough when we got a poorly worded, not very grammatically correct offering from a prince in Nigeria that if we just send him some money, he's going to be able to get his millions out and pay us back. Well, now we have AI-generated social engineering attacks, which are extremely sophisticated, where I can leverage a generative AI tool to, generate very sophisticated, very persuasive emails. I can use it to do deep fakes of a CEO. If I can get my hands on some of his recorded speaking, I can create messages that appear to be from him in his voice. Even video, in some cases, can be used to do deep fakes. So very sophisticated, very elaborate, high technology social engineering attacks that are being used right now against healthcare organizations across the U.S. In addition, AI tools are being used to help threat actors identify vulnerabilities in healthcare networks more efficiently. So finding those weak spots in our health networks, in our footprint that's out there, our attack surface, if you will, looking through that, searching for vulnerabilities that exist. It's also being used to enhance malware or the implementation of malware. So, for example, and I don't think this has been caught in a while, but certainly has been done in the laboratory, where I can sort of get around the antivirus, anti-malware by not having, you send the phishing email, you click the link. Instead of downloading the malware, it downloads some code that then reaches out to a generative AI that then generates the malware and then implements the malware. So, these kinds of attacks to get around our current defenses, to create malware on the fly almost, if you will, within the environments, is something that is now out there, now being talked about. And of course, it's not just that, but there's the attacks on AI itself. So things like data manipulation, data poisoning, attacks to actually steal the models themselves. This is something that we're also starting to see in the wild. I was part of a group that wrote a specific paper on top threats to AI models and machine learning models by the Joint Cybersecurity Work Group, part of the health and public health sector community that did that work. And so we're starting to see that. So if you're a vendor in particular, trying to maintain your intellectual property in the form of the models that you've generated or the solutions you've generated using these technologies, that again is something that you need to be aware of, that there's folks out there who are just looking for the opportunity to steal your technology. So from a user perspective, from the the provider community that may be looking to purchase and or develop these types of tools, what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for things like what were described as trustworthy AI by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And there's different organizations that have come up with different flavors of this trustworthy AI, or principles or characteristics of trustworthy AI. And so they're going to be looking for things like, well, we want it to be valid and reliable, providing accurate and consistent results. We want it to be safe. And this is important, depending on how close that AI or that machine learning is to the patient. And in some cases, it may be actually embedded into the patient. We need to have different controls around the safety of this technology, depending on how close to humans they are and how risky it is to human life, health, property, environments. Needs it to be secure and reliant or resilient, obviously. Again, particularly if we're dependent on it, or as we become more dependent on it for the provision of care, accountable, transparent, explainable, and interpretable. This is a big one and a difficult one for many of the organizations that I've talked to. Can you explain how your technology works and do that in a way that's going to be understandable by those who are trying to use it? Oftentimes, that's more challenging than you might think to do. Of course, privacy. Privacy is a big part of this, and fair and harmful bias is managed. This is another thing that's of particular concern to our provider community, is that there's not some sort of harmful bias within the technology itself. Oftentimes we can train these technologies on a set of data that comes from a community that isn't necessarily representative of the community for whom it will be deployed. And then you can come up with, all sorts of challenges around fairness and bias within the solution itself, something that's of significant concern for many folks out there. So if I'm someone who's developing a solution that includes AI or machine learning as a component in it, I should be thinking about how do I align with these characteristics of trustworthy AI? Am I in a position to have a conversation with my potential customers around my solution and address these concerns that they might have? So, and this gets to the next question, which is, so what do we in the healthcare ecosystem do about all of this? And so that's where I'd like to go next, is a bit more about that. And certainly when I talk to the provider community, what I'm telling them is, look, there's all sorts of potential here, lots of potential value that we can get from the adoption of machine learning and artificial intelligence. But we need to be very careful, particularly at this moment, that we don't get caught up in the hype, because the hype is strong. So what do? Well, we need to be sure that we're staying true to our mission. And when I talk to them about their mission, it's providing compassionate, high quality care to their communities by managing their resources wisely. This is a big thing for many organizations, because a lot of our hospitals out there run on a shoestring. Basically, they don't have a lot of slack in terms of their resources, so they need to be managing them wisely. We want to ensure that essential services remain accessible. This is another problem that we have, and in many cases they want that to be local and prioritizing the well-being of the patients we serve. So a very patient-focused sort of mission. And so when we think about the investment that they might make in these types of tools, they want to be very careful that investment is going to be aligned to serve and accomplish their mission. And so that's the thinking that they have when they're going through this process, or at least that's the thinking they should have when they're going through the process of considering investment in AI and machine learning types of solutions. Now, what we're seeing is, in our work with different organizations, there's different ways we can sort of slice them. But one thing that we're seeing is they're falling into sort of three buckets. One is we don't understand this and we don't want it here bucket. And for those organizations, many of them right now are saying we do not support at this time the use of any AI or machine learning tools, and we're prohibiting their use in our environment until further notice. So that's one bucket of let's call them the most risk averse clients. Then there's the other extreme, where we're seeing a lot of the well-funded academic research types of organizations who are all in machine learning and AI types of solutions. Many of those organizations are developing these solutions themselves. They're doing it in collaboration with health IT type of vendors. There's a lot of flexibility in what they do. There's not a lot of strict governance around what they're doing. There are folks that are on the other extreme, right? They're risk takers. They have the resources available to take risks, to try to push the envelope in terms of what's possible. And there's those organizations we've talked to as well. And then in the middle are the organizations that many of which are recognize that there's benefits that can come from the adoption of AI, machine learning types of technologies, but they also recognize that there's risks associated with that. And they're very focused right now on establishing governance around this so that they can make better, more informed investments and decisions around what they want to do and what tools and technologies they want to adopt. So that's really what we're seeing in that space in particular. What are recommendations? Sorry, what are recommendations that we have and that we're making? And they really come down to, at a high level, these 7. We're recommending that folks implement robust AI governance programs. Sometimes that's done as a standalone program, and sometimes that's done as a part of their larger IT governance type of program. There's some reasons why you may go one way or the other, depending on the capability of your folks in your organization, and or how big of a role AI and machine learning is going to play within your organization. Developing a comprehensive strategy aligned to your organizational strategy for the adoption of an AI program. Ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements, a challenging thing because they're changing and being developed as we go here. Implementing baseline cybersecurity safeguards, those are the more traditional safeguards, as well as safeguards that may be unique to the AI and machine learning technologies that we're adopting. Ongoing risk management, understanding what our risks are, making treatment decisions around those risks that are above our level of acceptability, maybe implementing risk mitigation factors to further control that risk. Fostering a culture of security and compliance. I don't think I can stress this enough. The tone comes from the top, and then collaborating with trusted AI and cybersecurity partners. And I'll go into each one of these in a little more detail. But at a high level, that's the message that we're giving to the healthcare industry right now, who are trying to think through what are we going to do about this? What do we need to do about AI and machine learning? And so from implementing a governance program, that's a lot of people and process type of work, having that oversight, that governance committee. And again, some organizations we're working with are doing this as a standalone. And in other cases, they're incorporating this into their broader IT governance type of program. But making sure that we have policies, what's the acceptable use, for example, of AI within our organizations. And, when you talk to folks, even those organizations that tell me, well, we're not, we don't have any AI applications, I can bet you, I'd feel very confident that there are probably folks within that organization using AI, machine learning types of tools, generative AI tools. There's folks out there probably unbeknownst to them using ChatGPT and using Grammarly and using, a number of these other tools that are out there and have been out there for a little while now, unbeknownst to the powers that be there. And, we don't know what information, for example, that they're putting into those tools and whether it's proprietary or patient data, et cetera, et cetera. So having that policy, training people on policies, making sure that we have an inventory of those systems or technologies that we're using that have AI or machine learning components within them. Data quality, integrity, a big part of this, security, privacy, et cetera, et cetera. All of the things that we would typically see within a governance program are particularly important. And for each one of these slides, I've included references, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be providing these materials to you. There's references to additional information if you want to do your own research to further understand sort of how would I go about implementing these steps for an organization. Developing that comprehensive AI strategy, again, really critical that what we're doing aligns with and is in support of our larger organizational goals and objectives. There's a lot of what we're seeing to a certain extent. Sales folks are good people, and they are very effective in what they do. And in many cases, they're interacting with physicians, and they're talking up the capabilities within their technology, and the physicians are pushing for the adoption of technologies. But we really need to understand whether or not that is really going to result in an improvement or facilitate the accomplishment of our mission before we're making those kinds of investments. Priorities, timelines, risk management, KPIs. How do we measure whether or not the technologies that we're implementing are effective? Another important thing that needs to be done, and there's in terms of risks too. Here's another thing that we're starting to see. There's representations being made around the accuracy, the reliability, the testing of these solutions. And in some cases, at least initially, what is happening is those representations may not be accurate. And so there's been a number of recent cases, both at the state level. There's been a case in Texas by the Attorney General there, who went after a AI company for misrepresentations around the accuracy and the reliability of their technology, healthcare-focused technology. The FTC has also put out a number of warnings, if you will, or recommendations to organizations to be very careful in the representations that you make in your advertising, in your marketing, and to your clients around the accuracy and reliability or any testing that you've done of your solutions, because they are on the lookout for organizations that are misrepresenting the accuracy of their solutions. And so we need to be very careful as vendors that we don't run astray of the FTC or any state attorney generals in terms of the representations we're making around the accuracy of our solutions. But in any event, being able to understand the strategy and how we're going to implement that, ensuring compliance with regulations is a biggie right now. So, for example, if we're talking about a medical device that has AI or machine learning as a component into that, we need to understand whether or not that is FDA approval, whether it's met the pre-market requirements, post-market requirements for those technologies. Certainly something that the FDA is looking at right now. I mentioned the FTC, and misrepresentations that might be made around the accuracy or reliability of technology. All of those things are concerns, or should be concerns, of vendors that are out there right now, promoting their tools. In addition to that, there's a lot of potential regulations, additional regulations that are sort of swirling about that may or may not come to fruition and get signed into law at some point. There's been presidential directives that have come out around AI and machine learning. A lot of activity that we need to stay on top of. In addition to that, there's potential update to the HIPAA security rule that may come out at any time, and other things that we need to be aware of, both as vendors, but also as providers who might be leveraging these technologies. Implementing cybersecurity safeguards, again, in the most part, these are the standard types of safeguards that we would be looking for around the confidentiality, protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, but also taking into account some of those unique elements associated with AI and machine learning. Things like data poisoning and algorithm hijacking, and assorted other types of things that can occur that we need to be aware of. Also being aware of the use of these tools and solutions against us is something that organizations need to be more and more conscious of. Conducting risk management, really looking at these solutions and understanding the risks they pose to our patients, to our organizations as a whole. Managing that risk on an ongoing and effective basis. I forget where it comes from, but there's in one of the documents that I reference here, there's a discussion of whether, the depending on the risk associated with a solution, whether where the human being sits within the decision-making process can the solution take action on its own, or does it require human intervention? Those types of questions we need to answer based on the risk associated with different types of solutions, and again, be aware of and manage that risk. That culture of security, the tone from the top, making sure that we have our policies, our procedures in place, that we're training on those policies and procedures, that we're developing, a reward and recognition system, that we're, it's not all carrots, it's carrots and sticks type of situation, to make sure that that we're incorporating security into all of the life cycle around the solutions and into our organizations and everyone within our organizations, because I don't think we're in a world anymore where security is thought of as an IT problem. I think there's a recognition now that's a much bigger problem than just IT, and it impacts all of our organization. But certainly, to the extent that there's not that awareness, we want to continue to try to build that everyone within the organization has a responsibility when it comes to security, and particularly in a world where social engineering and phishing is a leading problem and way in which organizations gain access. So, and collaborating with trusted partners and becoming a trusted partner. And certainly we're trying to be, our organization is trying to be a trusted partner, both to the vendors that are out there who are trying to offer their solutions in the marketplace and are being, inevitably asked to respond to security questionnaires around the security of their solutions. And those questionnaires are now more likely, as I mentioned earlier, to include questions around the accuracy, certainly when there's machine learning or AI involved, questions around the accuracy of that solution, any bias or fairness of this in the solution, data rights and privacy associated with the use of the technology. All of those things are things that vendors should anticipate and be prepared to answer in order to sell their solutions. And for our healthcare providers, certainly that they should be asking those questions of their vendors so that they can better understand these solutions. They're going to be, asking questions around whether or not it meets the characteristics of a trusted AI, for example. Those types of things are occurring, and certainly, in our position, working both on behalf of providers and on behalf of IT solution providers, kind of in the middle of both of that, and hopefully in a position to advise folks on both sides of that partnership in how best to deal with and get the advantages of these emerging technologies. So, for me, in sort of the, kind of wrapping up, and this is questions that we typically recommend for providers to ask of their solution providers. So, if you're a solution provider, certainly here's some questions that you might want to think about addressing in your marketing and or with your conversations with potential clients. And if you're from the provider side, these are questions you should be asking of your solution provider. Certainly is like, how is this going to improve patient care and outcomes? And what specific problems is it going to solve? What's the experience, patient experience going to be like if we adopt this solution? What are the risks to patient health and data security and privacy? Can we manage those? How do we manage those risks? Do the benefits outweigh the risk? Those types of those types of questions. Do we have the right governance structures in place to allow us to get the benefits from these investments while simultaneously managing the risk? Can we balance innovation with risk management? Again, I mentioned earlier that we're sort of seeing certainly our provider community break down into three different buckets based on the level of risk they're willing to take associated with the adoptions of these technologies. Those cutting edge, well-financed research organizations, the academic healthcare centers, those types of folks, very much all in the development and adoption of these types of tools. On the other end, we have our smaller hospitals, our critical access hospitals, who don't have on the one hand would benefit from improved efficiency because they have such limited resources. On the other hand, have very limited resources and it's difficult for them to make these kinds of investments. Very risk averse types of folks, and then there's the ones in the middle who are trying to figure out how to get the best governance structure in place to do these things. Again, what are the key performance indicators? How do we know if we're getting the benefits we intended to get when we started these initiatives? Are we investing adequately in our cyber defenses given what we're doing? Are we preparing for future challenges and fostering a culture of security? So those are the questions that we're seeing. And here's some of our folks that will be at events going forward that you may have an opportunity to talk to. And of course, I'm always available as well for questions if you have any. And I think we already got some questions coming in, and I'll just take a quick look at these. Yeah, so first question is, how can healthcare organizations using open AI models protect themselves against the risks of model manipulation, tampering with diagnosis and recommendations? What safeguards can you have in place? So it's very difficult right now. Here's some of the challenges with the current models. The current models, it's very expensive to train the model. So when you look at OpenAI, ChatGPT, those models were actually trained, a year or two ago. And so so they don't have current up-to-date information. And so there's, now the question is, well, how can we use or influence the model or provide to the model more up-to-date and current information? And you have technologies like RAG and others that are being developed to try to address that, to reduce the risk of things like hallucination. What I would say is from a treatment perspective, to manage that risk, you need to have a human in the process from a decision making. So I don't think that from my perspective, right now, I don't think that we can have, let's call it the fully roboticized doctor, right? Where I put my my information into one of these models and it pops out a diagnosis and treatment recommendation. We're not there yet. We still need to have a human in that process where they're evaluating the output of these models to say, hey, is this, is that accurate or not? And that becomes, again, somewhat problematic, particularly as we become more and more dependent on the models. How do I know whether the model's right or not? Those kinds of questions are very difficult questions that we have right now that need to be answered, I think, before we get too far down the road of having the AI models themselves in the role of diagnostician. And so that's a difficult problem. The other problem that we need to be very conscious of in the use of these models is that we set them up and establish them in a way that we're controlling where our patient information flows, right? So OpenAI is not going to sign a business associate, at least my understanding of right now, is not going to sign a business associate agreement with you. So you cannot exchange with those models, at least not legally, any sort of electronic protected health information. So you need to be very conscious of that as well when developing solutions associated with those current tools. Hopefully I somewhat got, maybe not the answer we're looking for, but kind of where we're at right now and the thinking around the use of those tools, right? Should have an AI governance mandate led by a committee that has stakeholders from parts of the organization. Yep. This is so more of a statement, I think, in support of governance, and certainly when we're thinking about who should be involved from an oversight committee perspective. My recommendation is that we're looking for stakeholders from potentially across the organization. There's an IT component to that. There's a security. There's a privacy component to that. But also the providers themselves. They're the folks that are going to be actually using this technology should have representation in those groups as well. And there's a number of organizations out there that have provided recommendations around governance. There's some good work that was done actually out of Singapore. The World Health Organization, I think, has done some work, and a number of others. World Economic Forum has done some work in this area. So there's, and I referenced many of these within the slides themselves. If you're looking for information around particular kind of best practice around establishing governance within your organization. Here's another question. What solutions does Clearwater use to secure endpoint devices in today's healthcare environment? Smart beds, patient monitors, infusion devices. So many of these are med devices and Internet of Things types of devices. So from a traditional endpoint perspective, like laptops, clinical desktops, those types of things, we deploy for our clients that we do, in particular managed security services, endpoint detection and response software. And there's a number of those solutions out there, Microsoft Defender, SentinelOne, that we use with our clients to secure those devices. When we get to Internet of Things and medical devices, that becomes much trickier because many of those, you can't install those types of traditional endpoint detection and response types of solutions on those. So what do we do with those devices? Well, there's a couple of things we can do. The first thing is segmentation. So we want to have those devices on separate network segments. And in some cases, organizations will use micro segmentation. So each of those devices will be in its own segment to further protect that from attacks that would gain access to the network and then move laterally across the network. In addition to that, there's some tools out there that help with Medigate, Zingbox, others that help with both identifying what those solutions are, where they are on the network, and to a certain extent are able to identify vulnerabilities that, known vulnerabilities that exist in those technologies. And to the extent that there's patches available, the organizations can patch those types of devices or technologies. The unfortunate part is in many cases, particularly for sort of the older medical device technology, there's no patching available. So in those cases, the best thing you can do is segmentation to further protect those. Any other questions that we have, India? I think maybe I got them all, but I was trying to read through those.
No, I think you did a great job answering what we have in the chat, Jon, and thank you for an insightful presentation and sharing some, really actionable strategies that we all can consider with a typically complex and potentially scary topic. So thank you for that. Does anyone on the call have any final comments or questions for Jon?
Hi, Jon. This is Kei Nakagawa. I'm the Director of Innovation for UC Davis Health. Thank you for a great presentation, very timely. We're dealing with a lot of these cybersecurity issues. One of the things that I keep thinking about is how much of this needs to be homegrown and customized to the health system, right? And how much of it needs to be outsourced to experts, right? And I think there's always a fundamental tension there between localizing the context to get senior leadership buy-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
While also recognizing that none of us are cybersecurity experts, we're health system providers and operators. And what is the strategy around education, cybersecurity literacy that allows us to then clearly delineate, the parts that need to be built in-house as governance, et cetera, versus getting outside counsel on this?
Yeah, so you're wrestling with what I think perhaps is the biggest challenge that we have now, and not just in healthcare, but generally, is complexity, and complexity in particular associated with IT and these IT solutions. So it used to be, you go back a decade or two, maybe a couple decades for me, and there were cybersecurity professionals. Well, technology's gotten more and more complex, and so now it's not just a cybersecurity professional because none of them know everything. Now I need, someone that specializes in networks and someone who specializes in, software development and security around software development, and someone who specializes in risk analysis and management. And so it's become a much more, IT has become much more specialized. These types of solutions require much more specialization, and so does security. So kind of getting back to your first question about, how much of this requires expertise or homegrown versus not homegrown. What we're seeing right now is we're still, particularly in the generative AI space, in the very formative years of this technology. And so there's models out there, and there's ways to build platforms to incorporate those models. That in itself requires a lot of expertise. Now we're seeing people develop the platform. So, it's like I can accelerate my development, but it's custom development, but I do that on a platform that's available, that, makes it easier to incorporate the different models. So I think we're still kind of feeling our way in what the, best approach to this is. If you're an early adopter right now, you may be forced to do something custom, whereas in, 5 years from now, or maybe less, there's multiple solutions that are more well-baked that are being provided by IT solution providers. So it's a question right now of how far, how much of an early adopter do we want to be? Some of that has to do with how risk averse we are as an organization, what resources we have available to us as an organization, that we need to be thinking through at this point. Not sure if that's really answered it. Certainly from a cybersecurity perspective, it's similar sort of situation. The first thing is, we need to have a lot of those same foundational controls in place that we would for all of our IT. And that's probably the first thing that we need to be focused on. I would be less concerned about some of the more sophisticated attacks right now, like the data poisoning attacks and the theft of the model or algorithm types of attacks. If I was developing these solutions internally in-house in an organization like yours, assuming that I have my foundational controls around all of that.
Mhm.
Those are, I think it's less likely that you're going to get those attacks. On the other hand, it's extremely likely that you're probably today will get multiple phishing attacks in your organization. And there's going to
Yeah.
be multiple attackers sort of surveilling scanning the external endpoints of your organization right now. I guarantee that's happening. There's over 2,000 attacks on healthcare organizations every day or every hour, I think, in the US, some crazy number like that. And so that's where I would kind of really be focused. I don't know whether that was helpful, maybe, but
Yeah, no, very, very helpful. I mean, I think the reality is we're, just frantically trying to keep up with raising our IQ around AI, and now AI is is now entering into cybersecurity risk, which I think right now we're just grappling with AI implementation around operational efficiencies and clinical care improvements. So I think this is a really interesting space, and I'll just kind of end with you use the word risk averse, and it's really interesting because it almost feels like, yes, we're very risk averse as a health system, as an academic medical center, but are we being oxymoronic and being risk averse by not mitigating the risk of these deep fakes, acting like your executive assistant, and then getting your C-suite to, answer giveaway information that you normally wouldn't even have that issue with AI. And so it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about what is truly being risk averse in this world of AI. But thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah, and I'll give you just a follow-up on your comment. I would tell you that those type of business email compromise attacks that I think you're sort of pointing to is, where the someone in finance gets a message from they think the CEO to send a payment to somewhere. Those attacks are much more common than organizations realize. We see them every day. The difference is those don't get reported to OCR. So they're not in the press, and organizations are perhaps not as aware that they're happening. And so, again, kind of understanding what the threats are out there and what's happening in the environment is really critical to understand and managing that risk. And it may be that we're not managing that risk because we don't understand how big of a risk it is. And that gets back to the risk management programs as a whole.
Awesome. Well,
I think I'm running over time now, India. So
Yeah.
you got me
That
talking
perfectly
chatty.
takes us to the top of the hour. I love it. And John's got some really great things on screen here. We're really looking forward to more of this partnership with Clearwater. And so if you are attending the health conference later this month in Vegas, please stop by the Scale Health Pavilion. Members of the Clearwater team and of course the Scale Health team will be there. We'd love to meet with you. We are also both going to the Chimefall Forum next month in November in San Diego. So if you happen to be at that event, please find time to connect with the Clearwater team, with the Scale Health team while you're there. And, as we mentioned, Clearwater, they're really thought leaders on this topic. And so if you enjoyed this educational webinar, they actually do a monthly cyber briefing on the first Thursday of every month. And you can sign up for that on clearwatersecurity.com to hear more insightful conversations just like John's led for us today. So John, any kind of final comments before we wrap it up? I appreciate you all so much for joining.
No, well, and thank you all for showing up. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. I think, as India mentioned earlier, providing this type of education, having these kinds of conversations with the industry is a big part of our culture here at Clearwater. It has been a part of our culture from our founding. Our founder, Bob Shafut, was in one of his previous lives an educator. And so, incorporated that into what we are and who we are here at Clearwater. And so every opportunity we have to talk with folks like you all, we are very grateful for that opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much again for joining. Thank you to the Clearwater team for doing this with the Scale community. For all of you on the call, we will distribute the recording of this session along with the slides for your reference. So please be on the lookout. And we hope to see you at one of these great events in the next few months. If not, we look forward to continuing the conversation online. So thank you guys so much for the time today. We'll see you at the next one. Bye.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, India. Everyone.